For my thoughts on all the latest happenings in the NFL in a completely relaxed, unscripted format, be sure to check out my channel, JG9 News. And now, on with our feature presentation. This man right here is Cleveland Browns running back Charles White. And in terms of the first incarnation of the Browns franchise, he unfortunately has to be up there with one of the biggest busts in franchise history, alongside guys like Clifford Charlton, Craig Powell, and Steve Holden. White was an unbelievable running back in college, and might have been one of the greatest running backs in the history of college football, as during his time with the USC Trojans, he was named the Pac-10 Offensive Player of the Year twice, was named an All-American twice, and won the Heisman in 1979. But with the Browns, it just never worked out, partly because of a cocaine addiction and an inability to stay clean. In 5 seasons with the Browns, he accrued just 942 rushing yards, and he found the end zone 10 times. That was it, for an average of less than 200 yards and 2 touchdowns a season over 5 years. That's awful for a first-round pick. And during his final season in 1984, he was extremely disappointing, as he finished the year with 62 rushing yards and no touchdowns. That means that this man right here did not find the end zone a single time in 1984. But what you might not know about White is that for about 5 seconds, he did find the end zone. For about 5 seconds, he had what would have been his first touchdown of the 1984 season and his final touchdown ever as a Cleveland Brown. And it would have come courtesy of what would have been, if it stood, hands down, the worst call in the history of the NFL. There are moments where an official makes a call and you're thinking to yourself, I don't know about that one, that's awfully questionable. Then, there are moments like the 2018 NFC Championship and the Don Chandler field goal at the 1965 Western Conference Playoff, both of which you can learn more about by clicking the card in the upper right corner, where you're thinking to yourself, this ref is blind and is woefully unqualified to be working. And then, there are the calls that are so bad that they make you laugh, because there is no possible way whatsoever that anyone in their right mind would call it that way, and calls where no one, not a single fan, no matter what team you're rooting for, would have made it. But in 1984, this man that you've been watching, Charles White, scored a touchdown against the New York Jets that we need to dissect today, 40 years later. Because this is the story behind the worst call that you've probably never seen before. Before I talk about the actual call in question, we need some context to understand the importance of this game, and how the game itself was going. It's October 14th, 1984. It's week 7 of the NFL season, and as we're nearing the midway point of the year, we've got an AFC battle on our hands over at Cleveland Municipal Stadium, between the New York Jets and the Cleveland Browns. Amazingly enough, this is a big game for both of these teams, and you'll see what I mean by that from the Browns' perspective in a bit. For the Jets, this is a big game, as they enter this one at 4-2 in the ultra-competitive AFC. Right now, there are 9 teams with a record of 500 or better, at a time when only 5 teams in each conference made the playoffs. And the Jets need all the wins they can get right now, because even though 4-2 looks nice, not only are they 2 back of the 6-0 Miami Dolphins for the division lead, and Miami's not showing any signs of slowing down, but they still have to play the Dolphins twice, so they might not have a whole lot of room for error in the non-Dolphin games if they want to make the playoffs. However, for the Browns, the 1984 season has been a rough one, and it's shaping up to be, quite possibly, their worst season in franchise history. They enter this game with a 1-5 record, and you would think that their season would be completely dead in the water thanks to an anemic offense that had scored the second fewest points in football, only 1 point better than the Houston Oilers, and thanks to 2 straight losses. However, and I cannot believe this, the Browns actually have a legitimate shot at the playoffs by this point, because the AFC Central is that bad. Yes, the Browns are 1-5, but even despite that, not only are they just 2 out of the 3-3 Pittsburgh Steelers for first place, but they own the tiebreaker for the moment over Pittsburgh, because Cleveland's one win was against the Steelers. Plus, Pittsburgh is going on the road this week to take on the undefeated San Francisco 49ers. And surely there is no way that the Steelers win that game, right? So if Cleveland wins this game, and San Francisco does what everyone expects them to do, and beats Pittsburgh, for all intents and purposes, near the midway point of the season, the Browns will be half a game back of the division lead. With all of that in mind, this is not the time for a referee gaffe or for an official to decide the outcome of this game. The officials really have to be on their A-game here because of the high stakes for both of these teams. And yeah, so much for that. The game starts off innocently enough on this surprisingly decent weather day in Cleveland. After the Jets get the game started off on the right foot, getting the ball and driving right down the field, and capping off the drive with a 3-yard touchdown run by Freeman McNeil, the Browns answer right back, and make it 7-7 at the end of the first quarter, following a touchdown run by Mike Pruitt. In the second quarter, both McNeil and Pruitt score yet again, with McNeil punching it in from 8 yards out, and Pruitt scoring from a yard out down by the goal line. Tack on a Pat Leahy field goal for the Jets, and at halftime, New York leads it 17-14. As a side note, to learn more about Pat Leahy and his time as the Jets kicker, click the card in the upper right corner. When the second half commences, after both teams punt on their first drive, the Browns march down the field and tack on a 49-yard field goal from Matt Barr. The longest kick of Barr's 6-year career entering 1984 was just 48 yards, so this surpassed anything he did before this season. And that takes us to the end of the third quarter and the start of the fourth quarter, where this game is a super close contest, as most people expected, where the Browns and Jets find themselves tied at 17 apiece. The Browns, though, seemingly have all the momentum at this point. After Barr's field goal, the defense forced a 3-and-out and destroy New York's offensive line. Then, after a completion to Ricky Feature, who you can learn more about by clicking the card in the upper right corner, the Browns had the ball in plus territory, on the verge of striking yet again and taking their first lead of the contest. A third down throw to eventual Hall of Fame tight end Ozzie Newsome gets them into field goal range for Barr, and they get even closer to finding the end zone after. Once the drive stalls and they have to settle for a field goal, the Jets get called for running into the kicker. And to open up the fourth quarter, on third down, quarterback Paul McDonald dumps it off to his running back, Charles White, for a gain of 11. Now, the Browns are in a goal-to-go situation. First and goal at the 6-yard line. 3 plays, or maybe 4 plays, depending on how aggressive head coach Sam Rutigliano wants to be, to score. And what happens next is the worst call you've probably never seen before. Because on first down, the Browns decide to give it to the man who got them their huge gain on the last play, and feed the hot hand, Charles White. The end result? Well, roll the tape.
For Willard. First down goal to go. 6-yard line, the official says. Charles White. Oh, he's greeted by committee.
No, your eyes are not deceiving you. No, you are not imagining what you just saw. The line judge on the play legitimately ruled that this was a touchdown. He wasn't putting up his hands to break up a fight, or because there was some other signal that officials give when they put both hands up in the air parallel with one another that we just don't know about. He was signaling that this was a touchdown. This play, which gained 1 yard from the 6-yard line, somehow gave the Browns a 24-17 lead. You know, for a fourth quarter play in a tie game, you would think the Browns would be celebrating like crazy if they actually found the end zone. Why weren't they celebrating? Well, it's obvious why. This was in no way, shape, or form a touchdown. In case you have stumbled across this channel and have no idea how football works or what the rules of the game are, in order to score a touchdown, you have to make it into the end zone, which means you have to cross the goal line. The goal line is that white line next to the orange thing, known as the pylon. So for all intents and purposes, based on this still frame, Charles White, when he got the ball, had to reach this line right here that's circled. He had to reach the line next to the letter G. He reached, well, nothing. He reached absolutely nothing. Now, obviously, this call did not stand, because I think everyone would assume the game was rigged if it did. The line judge talked with other officials, who probably looked at him like he had 7 heads at this point, and they ruled that no, this was, in fact, nowhere close to a touchdown, and was miles short of the sticks. And this isn't one of those things where you can say, well, you're evaluating this play from 1984 with a 2024 lens, where you have things like instant replay and slow motions and zoom-ins, where you can see where the knee hit the ground, so it's unfair to judge a referee's call based off of that, because it was close. No, this was not close. I think this should go without saying that this was nowhere close. And that raises a few obvious questions. Mainly, who the heck was the line judge that made the call, and why did he do it? Well, let's start with the who aspect of it. The man who made the call on the play you've been watching for the last few minutes was this man right here. A man by the name of Vern Marshall. And as it turned out, he was one of the most respected line judges in the game. He worked in the NFL and in the officiating ranks for quite some time. He ended his career working 50 years in football. And he even worked a playoff game later in that 1984 season, working the AFC divisional round game between the eventual AFC Central champion Pittsburgh Steelers and the Denver Broncos. In fact, that same season, it was reported that the top officiating crew for Super Bowl 19 had Marshall as the alternate line judge if their top choice couldn't end up going. He was super well respected and well liked in the officiating community, and his former crew chief would later say on Marshall in 2002, "All of us wanted to say, Vern, you're special." Any of the NFL officials would have said the same thing. Now I should note that, like every official, they make mistakes. Marshall was one of the linesmen during the infamous Cowboys-Lions game in 1981, when the Lions had 12 men on the field when they kicked the game-winning field goal. But even despite his screw-ups, with some way more egregious than others, he worked a ton of NFL games over the years, and even a bunch of NFL playoff games throughout the 1980s. So this was no spring chicken or newbie. This was a man who, at least on paper, should have known what he was doing. And what's even more bizarre about this is that you might think to yourself, okay, maybe he thought he was standing on the goal line. He saw White cross the line, and he signaled for the touchdown, and then realized, oh crap, I'm on the wrong yard line and I'm not where I'm supposed to be. But that explanation doesn't hold a ton of water, considering the fact that for the entire game, he was standing at the line of scrimmage, and not once was he ever standing in the end zone. Even on that play, you can see an official standing in the end zone. You can see the feet of a separate official standing 5 yards behind Marshall. So this isn't like the man was working 2 jobs and accidentally called the boss at his first job by the name of his boss at his second job. I don't know how this happens, other than to say that this is the worst brain fart I've seen by an official. At least it was corrected, but still, there's really no other way to say it other than either A, Marshall doesn't know the rules and is blind and doesn't know where the end zone starts, or, in all likelihood, B, Marshall just had one of the funniest and worst brain farts by any official in NFL history. As for what happened after that horrible call in the game between these two teams behind me right here, the Browns only got a field goal on that drive. So not only did they take away 7 points from the Browns that they obviously did not deserve, but they were only able to get 3, taking a 20-17 lead. It didn't matter though, as the Jets would drive down the field shortly after and would win the game with a touchdown, taking it by a final score of 24-20. This game turned out to be the penultimate game for Sam Rutigliano as the head coach of the Cleveland Browns. And if you want to learn more about his final game with the Browns, which was a loss to the Cincinnati Bengals, you can do so by clicking the card in the upper right corner. And as for Charles White, the man who scored the quote-unquote touchdown for the Browns in this game, again, very disappointing career with the Browns and in the NFL, as despite being a first-round pick, he never had a single season with more than 350 rushing yards. Except for 1987 somehow, when he had close to 1,400 yards, led the league in yards and rushing touchdowns, and was named a Pro Bowler and an AP First-Team All-Pro, and might have been the best running back in football. Riddle me that. So if any officials are watching this video, a quick rules refresher when it comes to this game right here. The end zone is the line by the pylon. The end zone is not the 5-yard line. The end zone and the 5-yard line are not interchangeable. So if you call the game as such, you're going to be ridiculed and laughed at and remembered 40 years later for all the wrong reasons. Today, no one remembers that Jets-Browns call for obvious reasons. It was 40 years ago, not a lot of people saw the game depending on where you were in the country, a 1-yard run isn't making it onto highlight reels, and the play was quickly corrected after discussion. This ended up impacting, quite literally, nothing. But 40 years later, it deserves to be remembered, because I can't say I've seen an official do something like this before. Because in 1984, when it came to the Charles White touchdown, line judge Vern Marshall did not have the white idea. Get your official Jaguar Gear 9 merchandise by going to jj9shop.com, and be sure to like and subscribe, as it really helps the channel out a lot. Join me every Wednesday night where we'll play NFL Trivia for cash prizes at 9 p.m. Eastern over on Twitch. To learn more about the history of college football, subscribe to Jaguar Gator 8. To learn more about the history of Major League Baseball, subscribe to Jaguar Gator 7. Also, special thanks to all of our Patreon supporters for helping out the channel. Your support is greatly appreciated. See how you can become a patron and request future video topics in the description below.